everyone, what's up? Welcome back to another review. I am super excited to show you today a review of the Adizero line, and in particular, the Adizero Boston 13. As you can see here, I have a stack of 3 amazing different pairs of shoes that I will be trying for you, but today is going to be focused on the Boston 13, which is at the top. First of all, initial thoughts. Someone's gonna come at me here, okay? Because I've said time and time again that I am a neutral shoe girl, love plain colors. I kind of, except today, you'll see why. A pop of color in my outfits, but shoes, I really prefer very neutral shoes that kind of go with everything, just personal preference. But today, we went a little wild, okay? So maybe some of you are gonna be very excited to watch this just based on that I went a little bit out of my ordinary for colors. But yeah, we have a really pretty coral and turquoise situation going on. Pretty excited about this color combination. I saw it and I wanted to give it a try, see it in person. This shoe comes in quite a few different colorways for both men and women. They do have quite a few neutral options as well, but we're spicing it up today, okay? Trying to keep everyone on their toes. That's what I like to do here. Let's chat about the details of this shoe. The first thing I did notice was the shoe weight. It's a tad heavier than I like. If you've heard me talk about it before, I usually go for a lighter shoe. And when I say heavier, it is not a heavy shoe by any means, but it is on the heavier side. The weight of this shoe for a women's size 7, which is my true size, what we're talking about here today, is 7.7 ounces. A men's size 9 comes in at 9.2 ounces. Not terrible, but definitely not on the lighter side. This shoe is designed for speed training and race prep. So I wanted to grab this shoe because I am currently training for a half marathon, and I felt that this could be a very nice complementary shoe in my rotation, given that I'm looking for something for longer distances. I'm looking for something that I can pick up the pace, but I also want to test it out to see how it does at some of those slower paces too, just to kind of give you that full, well-rounded experience of how a shoe performs at every single pace. It is also described as lightweight and responsive. As I said just a little bit ago, lightweight seems to me maybe that it is as lightweight as I would expect. So it's hard for me to say that this is a lightweight shoe, given that most of the shoes I have tried and use come in 7 ounces and below in terms of weight. Let's chat about the makeup of this shoe. We do have a really nice breathable mesh upper. This mesh is not as flexible. It's a teeny bit more rigid, a little bit less forgiving. So something to note here, if you do like more of that softer, malleable fabric for mesh, this is not that. This does, you can hear it probably, it's a little bit more plasticky here, just to give that heads up there, because some people don't like the way that that feels, and I want to make sure I'm calling out everything that I'm noticing. For foam, we have the Light Strike Pro Foam. So this midsole cushioning is composed of 2 different layers of EVA foam. It's designed to limit energy loss while still being a lighter weight foam. This is said to absorb a lot of that energy, which I'm excited about because I have noticed some shoes when you're striking, you take a lot of the brunt of that striking. So my hope is that this foam does a good job at absorbing some of that stress and you are not having to deal with that. It says it can do it. I'll let you know if it can. It's a relatively stiff shoe, partially I think due to the composition of the foam, but also there are added carbon rods in this shoe, as you can see here. This is kind of a unique added touch in terms of plating in a shoe that I have seen. Most shoes I have seen do not have a rod structural design. This is designed to mimic more of the natural foot composition and structure, and it's supposed to be a little bit less harsh compared to a standard carbon plate while still giving you more energy return. This will be interesting to me because I know a lot of people are very mixed feelings with plates, and I know a lot of shoes nowadays are starting to figure out how to make solid foam technology that can sort of replace a plate and still perform in a similar way. And plates can be harsh on people. Some people love them, some people hate them. For distance running, especially at higher paces, I do like some sort of a plate, but it's definitely personal preference. I have found shoes I have enjoyed running longer distances at faster paces without plates. So this seems like this is going to fit somewhere in the middle there. I'm really excited at how this is going to feel. I'm curious if anyone else has tried shoes similar to this, or if there are many other brands that do similar technology with their plate structure. While we're looking at the bottom, let's go ahead and talk about the overall outsole of this shoe. So what's really cool about this is it does have Continental tire rubber. Well, I guess it's not Continental tires, but it has the same rubber that is used in Continental tires as the rubber on the bottom of this shoe. So it's supposed to be a very strong and durable grip. It includes the light traction technology grippage as well. Feels like it's going to be pretty stable overall in terms of grippage. I typically don't love very flat and smooth shoes, and this feels like it kind of is on the flatter and smoother side. The composition of the rubber matters a lot more than the actual how I can feel to the touch. So once we get into the pavement, we'll be able to have a better understanding of how much actual gripping do I get. Is it something that I would think I could maybe run into issues when it's a wetter environment? We'll see. I don't love running in the rain, so it's something I tend to avoid. If it is a race day and there's rain, there's nothing you can do about it. So I do want to make sure my shoes can hold their own when it comes to a potential wet day. The bottom here overall, what is very interesting about this is there is this cutout here. I think some of this is due to probably cut back on some of the weight and by taking out some of that foam there. But because of that, I'm kind of curious of how this is going to feel with striking. I am more of a midfoot striker, so not too far away from the center of the shoe here. And I'm just hoping I don't have any stability issues with this cutout. I've heard shoes have been doing this in different models to try and cut back on some weight because it isn't maybe as necessary depending on where you're striking. I will speak to this when I'm done running to give you more insight on if I noticed this, if it was something that didn't matter at all here. Overall, the width of the shoe in general doesn't seem to be too narrow. I'm going to actually try the Evo SL in another review. I have run in it for a very, very short distance before. I will speak to that in its own video, but in general, I will say that it felt as if it wasn't necessarily that the outsole of the shoe was narrow. So with the Evo SL, where your foot goes on the inside, so the insole part of the shoe, I found that it felt as if my foot was going over the edge in this region here. So almost splaying over on top of the foam versus on that insole part. Now I want to actually take it for a long enough run to be able to let you know if that is something that was just very temporary since I just put it on for a quick short run, or if I really was noticing it being a negative thing for me. I'm not sure. I'm hoping that this is different than that. Being that it is sort of the same family of shoes, it may have a similar overall foundation. We will see. The heel to toe drop here is 6 millimeters. I love anything from 6 to 8. That's kind of my sweet spot. Beyond 8 gets a little bit harsher for myself as a midfoot striker. I feel like you go much lower than 6, then it's also a little bit more strain on my Achilles and ankles. Price point of the shoe. This comes in at $160 US, pretty in line with most of its competitors, if not a little bit on the cheaper end. Well, I'm excited to take these out for a run here. It is that time. I'm going out today for probably 5 or 6 miles. I really should do 6, but we had company in town this weekend, so it's been a bit of a busy weekend. It's been a lot of go. So kind of wanted to take it easy, but I really want to see what these babies can do. I think there's a lot of potential in this shoe. I'm pretty pumped about this. And I'm curious if you guys have tried the Boston 13, the Evo SL, or the Pro 4, kind of the 3 in that lineup that we're going to be testing out. And stick around to find out what my thoughts are. And answering that question, is this a Thunderstruck shoe? I'll let you know soon. All right, everyone, I am back from my run and I'm excited to talk to you all about this shoe, how it performed, what my thoughts were, and what my rating is in the 4 categories: performance, quality, comfort, and cost. Initial thoughts. I put this shoe on and I did find it to be very comfortable. Something I did not mention earlier is that the heel collar here actually has a pretty fair amount of cushioning. I do appreciate that just because I am susceptible to blisters. So having a little bit of that extra protection is very good for me, and did not have any issues with blistering. So that was a win. I did feel that this shoe ran about half a size big. I am a pretty true size 7. And I had over a thumb's width here for my big toe, which is my longest toe. Just something to note because I do know people prefer to have their shoes, especially for maybe faster running races and whatnot to be a little bit of a more snug and comfortable fit, and I felt I had a little too much room here. The mesh, as I spoke of earlier, it is kind of more of that plasticky material. That is something that I did not love for this shoe. I mean, you can even kind of see it now, how it sort of held that shape after the run. It just was bending into the top of my foot as I was striking. So that repetitive feeling of this pushing into my foot. Now, it wasn't a ton of pressure, but it was enough that I didn't love it. It was a tad uncomfortable for me. Some people may not notice it as much, but over time I sort of got used to it and adapted accordingly. The width of the shoe, this was a very decently wide toe box. I think that this would be great if you have wider feet. And in that case, maybe you wouldn't need to size down half of a size because, like I said, I did feel that it ran a tad on the big side. But for if you are concerned for width purposes, I think that I had more than enough room to splay my toes as I was running. As far as this cutout here, did not notice that at all. I did notice possibly what I'm perceiving to be the carbon rods sort of putting a little bit of pressure between my arch and the ball of my foot. I did notice that inside kind of folding in as I was striking, and it didn't bother me a ton. It actually, as I did go faster and pick up the pace, I did notice that sort of dissipated. I think as the shoe is dubbed a faster shoe, race day prep, I do feel that it just naturally is going to have less of those small details that you notice the faster you go, because when you're going slower, especially with a plated shoe in general, you're going to notice that a tad more. My paces were anywhere from an 8:30-ish all the way up to about 6:50. I did do some interval training because that's sort of what the shoe is good for. Definitely some speed pickups in there, and that was where it thrived. I do feel that this shoe, again, I think you can go a little bit slower. I wouldn't recommend it for a daily trainer or a recovery run, just because I think those carbon plated rods, the energy rods, are a tad noticeable. And in general, I don't think plated shoes are the best for daily training. If you are wanting this for a slower pace, this is probably not the shoe you would want to select. Although it wasn't necessarily poor performing at that, the foam composition, it was responsive, but it wasn't propelling you forward a crazy amount. So it wasn't one that you needed to go fast. I think that it was where the energy rods came into play, that it was a little bit noticeable at those slower speeds. Weight-wise, I do feel that this was a tad heavy for me. It wasn't as bad as I thought. Anything over 7 is where I get a little bit questionable in terms of if I'm going to enjoy it as I'm running longer distances. But for this, I just felt that didn't bother me too much. I actually didn't feel that it was that much heavier than some of my lighter shoes. The tread here, as I spoke of earlier, there isn't a ton of grip that you would see to the eye. Apologies, it is pretty dirty for my run, but I do feel like this rubber was very solid. I think that this would hold up well on some of those wetter terrains. I mean, if it was a downpour, I probably wouldn't use it personally, but again, don't like to run in the rain, so I probably would try to avoid it at all costs unless it was a race anyways. But I think it would hold up just fine. I don't have any complaints here. I think that this was a solid tread. Let's rank this. Quality. I would rank this an 8.3. I think this was a solid quality shoe. Overall, the foam did a great job. This feels very durable, and that this is a foam that's going to hold up over quite a few miles. The energy rods did their part. Although like I said, I noticed it a tiny bit in terms of feeling it on my underfoot. I feel that they gave me a lot of that propelling that I wanted. I didn't feel that this lacked any stability. I feel overall it's a solid shoe. Comfort. I'm going to rank this one down a tiny bit, and I'm actually going to give it a 7.4. Now, that's not a bad score by any means, but the reasoning that I've dropped it a tiny bit from what I would love to give it is primarily due to the mesh upper here. As I spoke of, that was kind of starting to press into the top of my foot. Didn't love that. I don't like to have anything that's giving me some sort of a repetitive annoyance as I'm running, especially longer distances, and it did bother me a tad. Didn't hurt, didn't blister, there weren't any concerns there. It was just this constant pressure in a very small spot that I didn't love. So that wasn't the most comfortable. And as I spoke of as well, the energy rods seemed, I believe that's what was going on there, seemed to be kind of pushing into my foot as I was going at those slower speeds. And the reason I'm docking it for comfort is because when I'm saying slower speeds, they weren't necessarily recovery run slow speeds. They were still a decent speed, so somewhere around that 8-minute mile time, and I felt that really shouldn't have been noticeable at that pace. In terms of how it fit, I felt that it was just a tad big, but it wasn't necessarily uncomfortable in that regard, and then the foam composition felt pretty solid overall. So I think that's a relatively fair rating for what I would think based on all of those different components. Performance, I'm gonna give this an 8.5. I feel that this was a solid shoe for that speed training and race day prep. Of course, again, being a little bit on the heavier side feels a tiny bit contradictory for me for what I would want to kind of use for some speed work for race day. But again, part of me also thinks that having a tad heavier shoe for some of those faster runs isn't necessarily a bad thing, because I think it's going to help you kind of push a little harder. So when you do drop the weight for a race day shoe, you're gonna have a little bit more energy because you're not taking some of that burden of the shoe with you. The foam composition was great. I think that it gave me that responsiveness that I was looking for, so I have no complaints there. The energy rods, I don't think it was as harsh as a carbon plated shoe, which I anticipated just with the little I know about the energy rod, the carbon energy rods. I didn't have necessarily enough context to know how different that would feel from a standard carbon plate, but it did give you the energy that you would still want from one, just a tad less firm, which I personally enjoy. Price point, I'm going to give this a 9.2. $160 for a shoe like this, I think is a solid price point. I don't find this to be on the high end. I think it's relatively competitive. When I think of another shoe I reviewed recently, the Asics Sonic Blast, I don't think that that's a one-for-one comparison, but because that's top of mind since I've recently done a review on that, that's a steeper price point. I believe, if I recall correctly, that was $200. And this is $40 less, and I think that it gives you a lot of similar performance that shoe does. Didn't have the blistering in this as I did with that, so that's a bonus for me. I love that. But yeah, if you're in between maybe those two shoes, I think this would be a good match overall if you are comparing those. Again, there's a lot of differences there, so it's hard to compare them one for one, but I think that in terms of what you would use them for, I think you can get the same thing out of either of those pairs of shoes, and then this price point being quite a bit lower, it's a win for me. Now, is this a Thunderstruck shoe? So I find this very ironic to me that the foam is called a Light Strike Pro. These are energy rods. I feel like all of those different components that make up the shoe leads itself to needing to be a Thunderstruck shoe. So yes, indeed, I call this a Thunderstruck shoe. I think that this fit the bill for all the things it said it would. I enjoyed my time in this. I do feel that I wouldn't probably like to run very long distances in this. I think having more fun at some interval training, some speed work, and just kind of getting your taste at what race day could look like. All right, everyone. Well, that's it for this shoe. I'm really excited for you guys to give this a try. Let me know your thoughts if you do, if you agree, if you disagree. I love to hear it. It's just great to get different perspectives because everyone has different opinions and different needs and wants in shoes. So it's awesome to hear from everyone out there what their thoughts are. Until next time, guys.